In the outskirts of a forest next to a mountainside in the realm of Teniras, the ruins of two once great watchtowers can be found. Legends told that a crack in the mountainside was a gate to another dimension, and that a red glow could be seen when evil creatures came out of the cave to ravage the land. The watchtowers were built to guard the Red Cave, as it was called. That was centuries ago. Now the watchtowers are just a few ruined walls, and 4 travel companions seek shelter in one of them for the night. Suddenly, their rest is disturbed by a strange noise and a red glow coming from the mountains. 4 traveling companions seeking shelter together. Galtrin the human knight, armed with great weapon and toughness 3. Raymond the swordsman, armed with hand weapon and also toughness 3. Haleth the elven archer, armed with great bow and hand weapon and also toughness 3. And finally Faywin the elven sorceress, who knows magic and is armed with a spear and has a toughness of 3. Coming from the mysterious Red Cave, they face the legions of the Undead, a skeleton champion armed with great weapon, 3 skeleton warriors armed with hand weapons, and led by an undead necromancer who knows all sorts of evil magic and is also armed with hand weapon. Then we have 3 skeleton archers armed with bows and hand weapons, and the forces deploy like this, with the undead in the deployment zone A and the travel companions in section B. There are 3 objectives on the battlefield in a dual mission, where each objective will give 1 victory point to the squad that controls it at the end of turn 4. The 4 companions have deployed inside one of the ruined watchtowers, and the undead have spread out along the opposite edge of the battlefield. The skeleton champion and the archers in the other watchtower, the necromancer and his pet zombie wolf in the middle of the battlefield, and close to the Red Cave, the skeleton warriors. Red dice for the undead and black dice for the companions, and the companions will have the first activation. But before we begin the first round, the zombie wolf has the scout ability and will be able to move up to 12 inches before the first round. And it moves very close, but not close enough to objective 2, in cover of the small forest and close to the companions. Now let's proceed to round number 1. Faywin, the elven sorceress, moves first. She advances and seeks cover behind the rock, and from this position she can see the zombie wolf. And she will try to fire a fireball spell against the wolf. She will need a 3 for the spell to go off. And it works. So the zombie wolf now will receive 2 AP2 hits, and it needs a 6 or 2 6s to defend. And it fails both of them. So the wolf will be hit with 2 fireballs and receive 2 wounds. And it will roll on the wound chart. And with a 5, Faywin has fired the zombie wolf out of the game. What a great start for the traveling companions. The skeleton archers advance 6 inches, and from this position they can see and shoot against Galtrin. He is in cover, but it really doesn't matter because they shoot with cursed arrows, needing 5s. One of them is a sergeant, the yellow die, so he will only need a 4 to hit. And the sergeant hits, and one of the other skeleton also hits, and it's AP nothing, so Galtrin will have to defend on a 4+. And he defends 1 and fails the other, so he will receive 1 wound. Haleth, the elven archer, moves up next to his friend and fires 3 arrows with his great bow against the skeleton archers. He has a quality of 4, and that means 2 and here 3 hits on the skeletons. The great bow is an AP1 weapon, so the skeletons will need 6s to defend the 3 shots. One of them managed to defend, the 2 other fails, so that means 2 skeletons are taken out of the battle right away. Nice shots by the elven archer. The necromancer now activates and he rushes towards the small forest where he will be very close to the central objective, but he's out of magic range, so he cannot use any of his spells. Raymond activates and rushes out of the ruined watchtower to seize objective number 3. So one objective is now under the control of the traveling companions. The squad of skeleton warriors coming out of the red cave now rushes towards the central objective, and they are close enough to seize it. So one objective is now under undead control. But they are now dangerously close to the watchtower and they can be within charging range of Galtrin. And he charges against them. He contests the objective and also charges the group of warriors. He has 3 attacks with his great weapon, hitting on 4s. So 2 hits and it's AP3, so they will need 6s to defend the heavy attack. And one of them defends, the other one does not. So 1 skeleton warrior is taken out. The 2 remaining skeletons now fight back. The sergeant with a 4 on the yellow die and the other skeleton with a 5 on the red die. So the sergeant lands a hit with his hand weapon, but Galtrin defends without problems. So no hits on Galtrin this time. The skeleton champion sneaks out of his cover and moves towards the objective, and he seizes objective number 1. So now the undead controls 2 objectives. And that is the end of round number 1. The skeleton champion controls objective 1. The skeleton archers was thinned out. There is a heavy fight surrounding objective 2. The necromancer is dangerously close. And then Raymond seized objective number 3. And the 2 elves with their magic and arrows are in the backfield firing at the undead. Nothing is yet decided. Let's go to round 2. Galtrin activates first. He could be the hero of the day, so he charges the necromancer and hopes to take him out with his great weapon. He will hit on 4s, and if he hits all of them, there will be a good chance that he can take the necromancer out. 3 hits, hitting on 4s, and really, really close and really, really bad. He hits nothing. But that's not the worst. Now the necromancer can fight back with his hand weapon. He also hits on 4s, and he hits all of them. It's an AP nothing weapon, so Galtrin might have a chance to defend. He defends on 4s, and again a really bad roll. He blocks one of the hits, but he takes 2 wounds, and that takes him to a total of 3, which means he goes down, and he's either stunned or maybe even taken out of the game. Whoops, the necromancer just fell over here. So a roll on the wound chart for Galtrin, and with a 3 he is luckily only stunned, but what a disastrous performance. The skeleton champion activates and he rushes forward behind the rock here, but he is closer to the action now, and who knows what he'll do next round. Faywin activates next, and she will try to repeat her fireball spell against the skeleton warriors, still needing a 3. And again, she is successful. So the 2 skeleton warriors will receive 2 fireball hits, and they have to roll a 6 to defend. And none of them succeeds, so one of them will be immediately blasted out of the game, and the other one will receive 1 wound and go down. And the roll on the wound chart is a 5, so once again Faywin has blasted an enemy unit out of the game. But she's not finished yet. She charges against the skeleton champion with 3 spear attacks hitting on 3s. And at least 1 hit, 2 hits against the skeleton champion. It's AP 1, so he will need 5s to defend. And 1 block and 1 goes through, so 1 wound for the skeleton champion. And now he fights back. 3 hits with his great weapon. 2 of them goes through, and it's an AP3 weapon, so Faywin will need 6s to defend. And she doesn't get any 6s here, so she's hit 2 times with the great weapon. And that means she has 1 wound left now. Next up, the Necromancer activates, and he is within range of a spell, so he casts Storm of Skulls against Raymond. He needs a 3, and with a 4 the spell is good. So now Raymond takes 2 hits with AP2, and that means he needs 6s to avoid being blasted by the spell. And even though he is rather close, he cannot defend the spell, and he takes 2 wounds. But the Necromancer is not finished. He charges the stunned Galtrin, and since he is stunned, he is immediately removed and knocked out of the battle. Heleth advances, so he is within line of sight of the skeleton champion, and he tries to repeat his successful triple shot with the great bow. And this time he fails miserably. No hits at all. The remaining skeleton archer moves forward, and from this position he fires against Faywin. He needs a 5 to hit. And with a 6 he fires a cursed arrow against Faywin, and she will need a 4 to defend, and that's exactly what she gets. Raymond activates next with a rather defensive move here. He seeks cover inside the ruined watchtower. From here he is not in line of sight or in charge range of the Necromancer. And that was the final activation of this round. The traveling companions still control objective 3, but it's not guarded by anyone. The Necromancer, who took Galtrin out of the game, is close to objective 2, but it's yet uncontested. And the Undead control objective 1. Now let's see what happens in the next round. Round 3 begins with a charge. The skeleton champion charges against Faywin, and he swings his great weapons with 3 attacks against her, needing 3s to hit. First, he needs a dangerous terrain test because of Faywin's spear, and with these dice, he is good. 3 attacks, 2 hits, and it's an AP3 weapon, so poor Faywin will need 6s to block the attack. And she fails them both, and that means 2 wounds to Faywin with a total of 4 now. So she is stunned, but there is a high risk that she's out of the game. And with a 5 on the wound chart, she is definitely knocked out. And with Faywin out, Haleth has to do something. So he moves into position and he decides to fire his arrows against the skeleton archer, trying to clear out that unit entirely. And he fires 3 shots, 2 hits against the archer. And he will now need a 6 to defend. This one is not good. So rolling again, and 2 fails, so he will be hit by 2 arrows. And a roll on the wound chart. 2 wounds and a 6, so he is fired directly out of the game. Again, a few good shots from Haleth. Now the Necromancer moves. He seizes objective 2, and then he fires a spell again against Raymond, and the same spell, the Storm of Skulls. He needs a 3 to hit. And a 3 he gets. So once again Raymond is hit with 2 AP2, and he needs 6s, and he fails. So he takes a total of 4 wounds now, which means that he will most likely be knocked out unless he can roll a 1 on the wound chart. And he is only stunned but heavily wounded. Not only did he manage to survive the 4 wounds, he also immediately jumps back up with his activation. At the end of the round, the undead need morale tests, and the undead rolls a die for every tough or unit, and that means the skeleton champion rolls 2 dice. And with a 1 or a 2, he takes 2 hits. And he goes down and rolls on the wound chart. And with a 4, he barely stays stunned. Now the Necromancer will roll 3 dice because he has toughness 3. And again, with a 1 or a 2, he will take a wound. And he rolls 1, 2 here, so he will take 1 wound, but he will not go down. But our heroes are also down to half strength. So Raymond first will take a morale test. He will need a 4, and he succeeds. And then Haleth also has to take the test. He needs a 4 too, but he only gets a 3. So he is leaving in a hurry. Too bad. So the skeleton champion might be stunned, but the undead controls 2 objectives. The Necromancer is in great shape, and the only hero left on the battlefield is the heavily wounded Raymond. So I think we need a miracle if this is not going to be an undead victory. Let's go to round 4. The skeleton champion activates, and he has nothing to do but to stand back up, and that will be his activation. With his back against the wall as the only hero left on the battlefield, Raymond takes a chance. He charges against the Necromancer with his hand weapon, and his plan is to hit him twice and maybe be lucky and take him out. So 3 attacks needing 5s, and unfortunately only 1 hit. The Necromancer has a chance to defend on a 4, and he fails, so he will take 1 hit, but it will not be enough to take him down. Instead, he can attack back. He has hand weapons too, and also 3 attacks needing 3s. So 2 hits back at Raymond, who will need a 5 to block, and 2 hits and 2 extra wounds. He now has a total of 6 and goes down, and he will have no chance but to be knocked out of the game. Everything else is impossible. And as a final insult, the Necromancer rushes towards the final objective. So now the undead controls all 3 objectives, and they have complete control over the battlefield. A clear undead victory. Now we'll have to see the consequences of this failure. And first Galtrin will roll a dice, and he gets a 6, and that means he gets a talent. So at least something good came out of it. Faywin next. If she rolls a 1, she will be in trouble, but she also rolls a 6 and gets a talent. Haleth, with his roll, and with a 3, he just recovers. And finally, Raymond, who went down with 6 wounds, and a roll of 3 for him means he also recovers. Galtrin and Faywin were lucky. Even though they were knocked out, they learned something from it. And with a 2, Galtrin receives the talent Motivated, and Faywin rolls a 4, which means she gets the talent Bitter Rivalry. So they will have these talents when they enter the next battle. Right now, they are surrounded by the undead. They lost the battle, they have nowhere to go or to flee. Their only option is to escape inside the Red Cave. And in the future, they will find out what exactly is inside. Thanks a lot for watching this battle report. I hope you'll join me for future Bat Reps.